Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, you want a good way to avoid bird flu and chicken eggs? Raise your own chickens. That is, if the government doesn't stop you. Gabriella Hoffman will join us coming up at the bottom of this hour on an important way for you to feed your family. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630 WMAL. Today, the Honorable Linda McMahon appearing before the United States Senate ahead of her arrival as the Secretary of Education. President Trump yesterday had this to say about the Education Department.
Look, the Department of Education's a big con job. They rank the top 40 countries in the world. We're ranked number 40th. But we're ranked number one in one department, costs per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world, but we're ranked number 40. We've been between 38 and 40. The last time I looked, it was 38, and then I looked 2 days ago, it came out the new list. It came out at number 40. So
we're not doing great, in other words. Linda McMahon today testifying about the state of the Department of Education.
The bottom line is because it's not working. Department of Education was set up in 1980, and since that time we have spent almost $1 trillion, and we have watched our performance scores continue to go down. I do believe that it is a responsibility to make sure that our children do have equal access to excellent education. I think that is best handled at the state level, closest to the states, working with state administrators, teachers, parents, who should have input into their curriculum.
That's right. It's time to empower parents and to actually generate good outcomes for students, and don't fill their head with garbage propaganda like they were born in the wrong body, you abusive ghouls. By the way, there was a protester today. At least there were a bunch of protesters today angry about this because they don't want the kids to get an education. Here's one moment.
Will you investigate those universities that are not complying with Title IX, that are not complying with the president's executive order? These universities are absolutely getting federal funds from this department, the department that you're going to run if and when you are confirmed, and I believe you will be. Will you investigate those universities and give them an ultimatum? Either they need to comply with the law, they need to follow the law of Title IX, they need to follow the rules issued by this administration, your department, or no federal funding. I mean, will you make sure that the law is enforced?
Yes, we will make sure the law is enforced.
Very good. Let me ask you about...
The senator will suspend. The committee will come to order. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individual from the hearing room. Members of the audience are reminded the disruption...
I'm a teacher. Hopefully not for long. I hope you're fired, because that was very stupid, and it's not about helping kids at all. Joining us now to discuss all of this, Nicky Neily, president and founder of Parents Defending Education. Nicky, good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so why are people so angry about Linda McMahon? What's going on?
Well, I mean, gosh, she is actually threatening the education industrial complex. She doesn't want the money going to line their pockets. She wants it going into classrooms. How dare she?
Yeah.
There were people who were big mad at the hearing.
You know, it's not that often that you have a nominee for an agency who promises that their goal is to make the agency go away. That's a pretty unusual circumstance. But what is that a sign of, do you think, Nicky, about the state of education in the country?
I mean, right now, we're in our Doge era. This is cut, baby, cut. Forget drill, baby, drill. It's funny because even in Bernie Sanders' opening remarks, he talked about how there's a need to make the department more efficient. And sir, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that the Democrats were in charge for 4 years. Why did you not care or hold them accountable for it being inefficient before? It's there's such illogic in all of their arguments.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. And it works against Bernie Sanders' entire socialist worldview. He thought if you concentrated more power into the government, it would make things better for everyone. Of course, the Department of Education is a textbook example of why he's wrong. Do you think that the federal Department of Education is not just failing to help students, but instead hurting them?
Yes, they are actively hurting people. I mean, to be fair, they only dole out about 10% of what local school districts actually get. But, they take federal tax dollars, they centralize it in Washington, skim money off the top for their 4,000 person, $88 billion bureaucracy. give the money back out to states and localities with a ton of strings attached, and then all those schools and districts have to, jump through hoops to comply and do all the reporting paperwork. Why don't we just give it directly to the states to deal with this? I mean, just like cutting out the middleman and cutting out all the strings and the nonsense makes a ton of sense, because we as a country did very well before the creation of the department. When everybody seems to forget, it was only made in 1979. We won back-to-back world wars without a Department of Education.
Obviously, one of the other pieces here, you heard Linda McMahon talk about it a little bit. You heard President Trump sign an executive order to this effect. It's on school choice, that students and families should have the right to go to a better school. They shouldn't be chained to a failing school in their community. We just saw the nation's report card come out recently, and it had abysmal results for fourth graders and eighth graders. It's millions of kids who are functionally illiterate. These are the lowest scores we've seen since the early 90s, record lows. Really bad. But the one bright spot, Nicky Neily, private schools, Catholic schools in particular, apparently they're doing very well academically. In other words, these students should be entitled to a choice, shouldn't they?
Absolutely. And you know what? That puts competition or puts pressure on the public school system to actually be better, because they have to compete for those butts and seats, right? I mean, schools get per pupil funding. And if you think, wow, I'm offering a crappy product, nobody wants it, they're leaving, maybe you might make a better product. But beyond that, families know what their kids' needs are. Children have different learning styles. Families have different values. And so this one-size-fits-all solution that the federal government is trying to shove down our throats is astonishing, because as you alluded to with the NAEP scores, I think the worst part is that the bottom fell out. It was the bottom 10, 25% where they got that much worse. Rich families have always had school choice. They can move. They can go to a better zip code. They can have a tutor. So this is really the Democrats being beholden to their special interest groups, to the teachers unions, and saying, no, you're going to be stuck here because that's how we want it to be, because that's what our allies, that's what they demand. It's disgusting.
I know it's not academic related, but when I think about this difference between the haves and have-nots, really, the left always wants to get rid of school resource officers from the schools. They don't like police being there to protect the kids. Yet all of the private schools that these rich lefties send their kids to, they have private security. So the government schools, your kid's not entitled to security, but at the private schools, they are.
No, and I even think about, like in Columbus, there was a couple years ago, some scores came out from LeBron James' charter schools, and, there weren't, proficiency scores were not great, but families are still choosing to put their kids into those schools. And, families have different reasons for that. Maybe it's because their kids don't have to go through a metal detector when they walk in. Maybe it's because there are, a more supportive community around them. It doesn't matter what a family's reason for wanting a different option is. But, people are entitled to make decisions about what fits their needs. And the fact that Democrats are fighting this tooth and nail, that they are trying to preserve this status quo, is so mind-boggling, because the status quo, as Secretary McMahon said, has failed. It is failing, full stop.
Let me play some audio from one of the people who's been benefiting from the current corrupt arrangement. That's Randy Weingarten, one of the teachers unions head bosses, on CNN this morning.
So what we're hearing is just complete chaos and, frankly, a whole bunch of cruelty. Because at the end of the day, you can make departments more efficient. And I'm not a big believer in bureaucracy, but this feels like, as Elon Musk said to you, evisceration. So here's a guy who has hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts from these departments, and he's not touching them. But what he's doing is really taking money from kids who really need it in the field. And these departments, yes, they can be much more efficient, but that's what the education department does. It gives out money to kids so you can feed them a decent lunch, so we can have, tutors for reading, so you can actually help kids with math problems. Mm-hmm. That's what's going on right now.
Randy Weingarten says she really cares about the kids. Meanwhile, she's taking well over $500,000 a year from all of the teachers' dues. Why is she so worried about all of this? If the government's just going to send the money back to the school systems, why couldn't she continue to skim money off the top from the teachers?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that they're talking about efficiency and bureaucracy, because all the Democrats, when they were asking their questions today, all I heard was them asking about preserving the bureaucracy. What about the department employees? They're living a culture of fear. There weren't any Democrats that actually asked about children and how that would affect them, right? And so that really shows where their priorities are. I mean, a lot of these programs were in place, IDEA, designed to help special needs children, et cetera. That, again, predated the department. and those programs are administered by the states. And so, like, why do we have all these people in D.C. doing nothing but adding problems? Yeah. I mean, the fact that the department alone has 100 comms officers is kind of mind-boggling. Like, what is that doing? How is it helping children learn?
It's not. It's not. It's a stupid jobs program for the left. Hey, so when you mentioned a moment ago that the federal government doles out something like 10% of all of the education dollars across the country. So it's 1/10 of the money, but it's a lot of money. We're talking a lot of money that's going out the door. And some of these school systems, particularly in our area, Nikki, are in open revolt right now against the Trump administration attempting to improve educational outcomes for kids in these government schools. How effective do you think that federal threat is, that we're going to remove your federal money? How effective will that be to get these out-of-control school districts to, comply?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see a lot of resistance. I mean, those days are back. And so I think, frankly, there's going to have to be some school districts or universities or all of the above where you're making an example of them. Let's think back to how the Obama administration had just the threat of pulling federal funding for a Title IX investigation at the University of Montana in, I want to say, 2005, maybe 2015, sorry. That forced every school in the country saw that investigation, got freaked out, and decided to sacrifice the First Amendment on the altar of Title IX. And so I think even just the mere threat or starting an investigation that might lead to a loss of federal funding on some of these issues, hopefully we'll start to make some of them, jump into compliance. I mean, Initially we saw the Virginia High School Athletics Association say, no, we're going to keep the trans athletes in place. They just backtracked. A bunch of the other states, Minnesota, same thing. Because I think they're realizing President Trump does not come to play. He comes to get things done, and he has no qualms about actually saying, no, he's a businessman. And so I think they should be scared, and I think they will have to be consequences,
yes.
and then we'll see some compliance.
Do you think President Trump should go to a school board meeting to deliver the news?
Yes, I saw somebody on Twitter actually remind people that, he owns property in Loudoun. He could go to a Loudoun County school board. Remember when Matt Walsh rented the apartment so that he could go speak at the school board meeting? I mean, he's a property owner in Loudoun County. Like, let's go.
That was Scott Smith, who was treated like garbage by Loudoun County. He's the one who did point out that, Trump actually owns property already there, so he doesn't even have to go through the process to speak at the Loudoun County school board meeting. He should do it. I think it'd be the best. And, really scare the hell out of him, which will bring me joy. Hey, thank you very much. Nicky Neily from Parents Defending Education. Thank you, as always, for all of your work. Yesterday I played some audio for you of Pete Hegseth addressing a bunch of European leaders. And during that, he said outright, he goes, it's foolishness to think that we're going to have Ukraine join NATO. That's stupid. There's no common sense end there. And the media went absolutely crazy. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And so today, Pete Hegseth was talking to the press again, and he gave another statement where he basically said, look, any final decision on what the United States is going to be party to is going to be made by President Trump. He's the guy, and for him, everything is on the table. So the press interpreted that as a walk back, that somehow Hegseth was walking back his prior remarks, and he should have never said that. And, oh, my goodness, this guy should not be Secretary of Defense. How amateurish. Well, President Trump was asked about this today in one of his – how many press conferences did he do today? He just was speaking nonstop in the Oval Office to all these members of the press today. Take a listen. Here he is responding to a question about Hegseth's remarks in Ukraine.
Yesterday were pretty accurate. I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war now, and I was right about that. This is a war that would have never happened if I were president.
But you don't think it's President Biden's fault, not President Putin? I mean, he's the one.
I think Biden is incompetent, and I think when he said that they could join NATO, I thought that was a very stupid thing to say. I thought when he said, well, it depends if it's a minor incursion. In other words, it's okay if Russia does a minor incursion.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a very foolish thing to say.
Very foolish thing to say. So there's President Trump, laying out a lot of common sense, and the media of course, distorting everything that Pete Hegseth said and what they're doing. And, oh, so you don't blame Putin, you blame Biden? What are these questions? You know, Trump is rightly blaming Biden for his weakness, creating the conditions whereby Vladimir Putin thought he could get away with it. And he did, didn't he? And also, it was Trump's predecessor, too. Biden's old boss, Barack Obama, who made it terrible. The invasion of Crimea happened in 2014, March of 2014, right after the American government under Barack Obama orchestrated a regime change operation in Ukraine. We have to stop doing this garbage. The American people are done with this meddlesome, destructive, chaotic behavior by the establishment. President Trump trying to restore some order, saying Pete Hegseth, this guy, in his view expressed yesterday, entirely consistent with the one the president's been sharing. And again, it goes right back to what I said yesterday. We were talking to Rebecca Koffler about this. I go, hey, Hegseth is not he's not freelancing here. He's the Secretary of Defense, loyal to the mission, working on behalf of President Trump and his agenda. There's no way he says this without the blessing. And what do we hear from the president today? He had the blessing. What did we hear from the media today? That he was speaking out of school, that he was walking back his comments. They just lie to you over and over and over again and then wonder why you don't trust them. Coming up, Gabriella Hoffman talks to us about how the government has been trying to stop her from having chickens in her backyard. Can you believe it? Yes, you can. Gabriella will talk about it next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 5:35 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The cost of eggs, a huge problem in the United States of America, thanks in no small part to bird flu, absolutely savaging the chicken populations at most of the major egg producers in the country. But some families are trying to take this problem into their own hands by literally raising backyard chickens and having them produce eggs that are unlikely to get bird flu because they're not packed in with all the other sick birds. Joining us now to discuss the difficulty in actually setting that up is Gabriella Hoffman, director of the Independent Women's Forum Center for Energy and Conservation. Gabriella, good to have you on the show.
Good to be on, Vince. Thank you.
Okay, so backyard chickens. You have backyard chickens. Do I have that right?
No, not currently. I did when I was younger. I have some experience. I've been researching how to get backyard chickens in Fairfax for several years.
Oh, I see.
And reading the conditions is daunting enough. And now they're not as transparent with how much it's going to cost, and they've added more steps to take in order to do it. I could do it under the table, but I want to try to be law-abiding, but it's unreasonable.
All right, so I just want to make sure to set this up for people. So you want to have backyard chickens. You live in Fairfax County of Virginia, and you thought, okay, well, this shouldn't be too hard. I own the property. I can put some chickens in my backyard. I can get some eggs going. But the county is interfering in this process because they have these meaningful impediments in your way. What are they?
Two things. If you do not have over 2 acres, you can't have more than 6 hens. You're forbidden from having roosters. So if you have less than 2 acres in Fairfax County, you have to pay $435 in order to meet that condition. Then beyond that, if you are part of an HOA, you have to get HOA approval. And if you have nosy neighbors who do not like chickens, you'll have that impediment potentially. I don't have an HOA on my street, thankfully, but the process would still be daunting. But this has been ongoing for many, many years. Fairfax has risen the price across the time I've lived here. And in wake of bird flu, it doesn't seem like there's any interest to perhaps be a little reasonable. This is the most expensive locality where you can have chickens all across the rest of the Commonwealth. Richmond, it's only $60 to have 6 chickens. It's a much more reasonable rate. Why have so many barriers to do this? But Fairfax just seems to be an exception.
$435. So this is this a one-time application fee, or do they do this to you annually?
It's not clear on the website. I've tried to look. I can't find if it's one time, if it's annual.
Got it.
I would have put past Fairfax to charge annually, given how much they don't know how to run a budget. But yeah, it's confusing. It's purposely done to do that, to scare people from wanting to do it legally. I know a guy a few streets over who does it under the table. He has an agreement with his neighbors, barters eggs with them. So some people can do it. I probably will try to do it, but I want it to do it legally, and I don't want others to struggle with this either.
I've heard of this. Where people, they've got the backyard chickens, and they don't want to call any attention to it, so they pay off their neighbors with a steady supply of eggs, and everyone's fine with it. They're all cool with it, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, because this to me is the kind of thing you want to be encouraging, right, Gabriella? I mean, you want to have people who are self-reliant, who've got their chickens, they've got their eggs. It's this, and I get like there's some people are like, oh, it's about the noise. Okay, but if it's just chickens, no roosters, you have hens, and you're doing this, and it's ridiculous. 2 acres is the minimum limit before they don't charge you, I guess, based on your findings. Like this should be something that people should be able to do, and in fact, we should encourage it.
Absolutely. If you want to be an environmentalist, a conservationist, knowing where your eggs come from is the first way to do it, and you can do it with backyard chickens. Knowing how your food is sourced. You had RFK confirmed. Brooke Rawlings today, too, the agriculture secretary. They are part of a mission to make America healthy again. Trump has tried to encourage people to be self-reliant in the greater scheme of things. And locally here, too, even the lefties, they want backyard chickens, too, but they haven't been aggressive in fighting this. So maybe our conversation today, Vince, could help spur changes in Fairfax County and maybe urge the Board of Supervisors to reconsider this really crazy rule.
I can't tell you how many lefties I've heard through the years tell me how cruel factory farming is. They're always talking about like, oh, they pack all these animals together. It's so cruel. It's so awful that it's occurring. And honestly, in the past, I kind of laughed it off. But nowadays, I'm a little more sympathetic to that argument. I think there's some legitimacy there. But again, if you hate that system, why do you create so many impediments to people doing it the right way?
Bureaucrats are bureaucrating, essentially, or they believe misinformation. They often claim on, criticisms about backyard chickens that it would feed into the Chesapeake Bay and cause pollution. But if you're composting your chicken's waste and reusing it in your backyard, how is that going to trickle into the Chesapeake Bay if you're very attentive and you're not disposing of things improperly?
Yeah.
So they create different excuses. It's just bureaucrats doing it to discourage people. And then, if you don't pay up, they don't want to work with you. So that's just how it is as we know in Fairfax County.
Yeah, so we're talking obviously your experience in Fairfax County, which I think is valuable. There's a lot of we don't have chickens, but in my house it's the kind of thing we've definitely talked about. Like maybe we should do this, and I'm always annoyed by the horror stories that people go through trying to feed their families in this way. What do you think is possible maybe at the federal level? We have a new agricultural secretary, Brooke Rawlings. We have got a president who's very focused on trying to get the government off the back of the American people and focus on the right things. What do you think is achievable here?
What could be achievable is perhaps Secretary Rawlings creating maybe a framework. I'm really reticent about national emergency declarations. There may have to be one somehow, perhaps maybe explored, a national egg emergency. And say, okay, localities, we would like you to cooperate with us in making it easier for people to have backyard chickens. Don't impose these ridiculous fees. Make sure the rules are reasonable. Yeah. If people want to have their own eggs. So perhaps something like that, or maybe some sort of executive order. But I think maybe she could force better cooperation with counties like Fairfax to say, in this event, you should reconsider the barriers you've created to this. That's one way to explore it.
Yes.
But they haven't really looked into that, I don't think. But they should.
Also, there's something that is downright, like straight up tyrannical about the government interfering in how you use your property. I guess there are some reasonable limits. I'm sure you could give me examples of where I'd be like, oh yeah, no, that's true. That should be totally illegal. But on the idea of like having chickens in your backyard, the idea that the government's involved in that at all in any capacity, is you're just using it for your own family, is ludicrous. It is totally ludicrous. It makes me revolutionary. I want to don a tricorn hat and grab my musket and go to war in order to defend the rights of people to have chickens.
We absolutely should. And here, the county could be doing so much better than creating a $500 million budget shortfall, but they crack down on people who want to have chickens.
Yeah.
Misplace priorities.
It is. Oh, my gosh. All right, well, Gabriella Hoffman, stay in the fight. I'm glad you're doing it, and thank you very much for your time today.
Happy to raise awareness.
Good to talk to you. There's Gabriella Hoffman with the Independent Women's Forum fighting for the right to have chickens. It's crazy that we have to do that. Let's see. Tom is calling in from Maryland. He's on line 1. Tom, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, how's it going? I agree with the previous caller. You know, I have chickens. I have chickens, I have ducks, I have quail and everything, and I like to have everything natural. And I hate to say it because, you know, Fairfax County can be nice, Frederick County can be nice, but once it gets overrun by, like, I hate to say it, the government telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Why? I always tell people, don't listen to what they say. It's why they say it. Why are they telling you you cannot have eggs?
Yeah.
The reasons why is it's control. They want to see how far they can control. They control what goes into the food.
Totally.
They control this, and the other. And I hate to say it, I'll stand on that hill to the day I die.
Well, that's their instinct. That is their instinct. It's control. It's about to what extent can they control your behavior, and then how much can they nickel and dime you? It's like, so you want to have chickens? Let's take some more money out of you.
Exactly. It's kind of like that thing that happened a couple years back. I think it ends with a 19. You know what I'm talking about?
Say that again.
I think it's kind of like that same thing about, like, it ended with a 19, COVID-19, see how far they can push us.
Oh, yeah. I was like, what is he talking about? What I was thinking you were referring to a date. Anyway. But yeah, no, you're totally right. Yeah. No, that's right. What can we get away with? We can force them to put plastic up and like hang it from the rafters and like, oh, now you got to stand behind plastic as if that's going to stop a disease from moving around. And you got to wear a mask outdoors while you're riding your bicycle, but don't wear a helmet. What is this? Yeah, no, you're right. It was totally crazy.
It's great. It is crazy how far the government's trying to push this, that, this, and the other. Look, if somebody owns their own property, I'm going through the problem right now of moving my father out to my property here where I live, and we got to go through jumps and hoops and bounds because he wants to move on the property to watch his grandkids grow up.
Man, it's too much. You know, and the idea that you can't, like the government limits how much money you can give to a family member, yet you can give tax exempt to some other, like some government endorsed charity. There are all sorts of really stupid things that need to be changed. And on the side of liberty and remembering that the citizen is right there at the top of the food chain. They should be. Hey Tom, before you go, how many chickens do you need to feed one person? How many to get all the eggs?
Well, I give them away to some neighbors and stuff, but if you got a family of 4 like I do, I usually say two eggs per day and 1 chicken. If you feed them healthy, you know, you can just do the math. And if you're doing 3 eggs per person, you got a bigger person. I'm saying 2 eggs per person, you know, and that's if
2 chickens per person
every single day. Yes, 2 chickens per person.
Got it. Okay.
You know, but that's if you are eating eggs every day. I usually say for a family of 4, 6 to 7 chickens. Okay. That's all you're going to need.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that call. Let's see. I've got Michael calling in from Mount Airy right now, line 2. Michael, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. How you doing, man? I love your show.
Thank you.
Yeah, up here in Carroll County, we don't have any of those kind of issues. You know, everybody where I live, we have 3 to 4 acres, and everybody has chicken coops, and they have their own. The biggest problem we have up here is foxes and coyotes getting to those chickens, you know, so we have to protect them. But yeah, I mean, and as far as my neighborhood, I live in a rural neighborhood, but we share everything with the neighbors and things like that. And it's fine. Everything's fine.
I've heard that the trick with the fox and the coyotes are you have to obviously you have to have a good coop, but it's the ground underneath. You've got to figure out a way to create a security barrier to keep them from digging under, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You have to put a barrier. We use, you know, like cinder blocks and a little bit of brick, but then put everything on top of it, and for the most part, in a roof over top.
Yeah.
Because the coyotes can jump, and so can the foxes.
They're crafty for sure. You gotta outsmart them. Michael, thank you. I appreciate that. Michael's having a good experience with the chickens. Thank you very much. Let me see. I've got Tommy calling in from Fredericksburg with a different take on this. Line 4. Hello, Tommy. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, so my my opinion of this is that a lot of these people that are up in Northern Virginia, they do not have the land or the capacity to actually have this many chickens, quail, ducks. In the summer, when it's about 100 degrees, and if you've not cleaned out all the poop, it's going to irritate the neighbors. And most of these people that are calling, outside of these other people that are calling from rural areas, right, if you've got less than a quarter of an acre, having 2 chickens is almost impossible without annoying your neighbors.
Yeah, I do think that my suspicion is that if you're the kind of person who's contemplating chickens, you probably have enough land where you could do that. But maybe there's a bunch of houses that are on these tiny postage stamps that are trying to set up chickens. But, regardless, again, it's your land, it's your property. And if you got a dispute with your neighbors, work it out like adults instead of the nonsense that we constantly get from our government. A $430 fine or fee or whatever this is in order to just get chickens seems kind of crazy to me.
That is.
Yeah. All right, Tommy. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's a good point. You can bring up there's got to be some effect of having chickens that your neighbors might detect. And again, work it out like adults. How about that? Isn't that? Remember when people used to do that? You go knock on a door and be like, "Hey, just want to talk to you about something." You're allowed to do that. It's 5:49 now. Let's see here. I've got Andy calling in from Fredericksburg right now on line 4. Wants to weigh in on the great chicken debate today on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Andy.
Good evening, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Fantastic. So I'm going to hit right off. A quarter acre can house a dozen chickens just fine. You can let them roam through your yard. They keep your yard and your garden pest-free. They have no problem staying on a quarter acre. So that's just hogwash.
Okay, so the call that we received was the guy said that, hey, if you're on a quarter acre lot, these chickens, they produce all this poop and it's hot outside and then it really smells and your neighbors can smell it.
Nonsense. Deep litter method, you throw leaves that you've stockpiled over the fall instead of sending them in the landfill. You put them in plastic bags and you put them behind your shed, and then you just layer your new leaves over your bed for your chickens.
Oh, cool.
And then you dig it out, you put it on your garden. It's fine. Not only that, but nobody lets me infringe upon my neighbor's right to have a dog. Never mind, his dog poops in the backyard, stinking it up. And nobody thinks that, right? Uh-huh. It's a huge takings by the government to not let us grow food on our own property. In World War II, everybody had Victor Gardens. Everybody grew chickens.
Good point.
Everybody manufactured a lot of their own food.
Yes.
And what we've created is a system that the big ag and big food want consumers, they don't want producers. And so they go through and they create these little infringements to reduce the people's ability to be independent. And I could talk about this right? It's like I can grow a beef on my 10 acres and I can give that beef away to my friends. But if I charge for it, then it's a health hazard, right? If I string him up and hang
Andy,
him
I'm sorry, I have to ask you, is this your line of work, what you're talking about right now?
No, I'm an engineer for the Navy, but I have worked very hard to get my meat supply out under the thumb of ag because of the hormones. I wanted my daughters to grow up with a normal puberty cycle, and so as a result, you could not feed them female growth hormone pumped meat.
So smart.
And I've worked very hard to do that.
Okay. After you're done serving your country, and thank you for that, maybe you could do it again by working with RFK Jr. over at HHS. I love what you're saying, Andy. You do it so well. Thank you for that call. Really, really good. Yeah, no, that's right. They want us to be consumers, not producers. Let's go back to producing. Let's make that a priority. How about that? This is America, after all. The great one, Mark Levin, produces great content ahead on WMAL.